Hey, everybody, and welcome to Frame This Podcast. I'm Philippe.
My name is Nate, as I put my hat on a little bit more.
Put your hat on. Oh, so snuggly. And
Papa Smurf in the house.
Oh, God, I'm never going to get through this. And today we have with us Rich, who is a professor of art at James Madison University, also a freelance illustrator specializing in movie posters. Rich, welcome to the show, and please tell us a little about yourself. And yes, thanks.
Hi, everybody. My name's Richard Hilliard, and I prefer everybody to call me Rich. I'm a professor of graphic design and illustration at James Madison University, and as I said, I specialize currently in doing illustrations for collectible movie posters, which a lot of people called AMPs, which is alternative movie posters. I've worked for Bottleneck Gallery, Mad Duck Posters. I'm currently working on a project for a company. I'm under a non-disclosure agreement, so I can't even tell you what the company is, but it's a company that most collectors and people who are into pop culture have heard of. So got some new things brewing. And then I also do collectible packaging for BluRay movies, primarily for Vinegar Syndrome. And my specialty is horror. So I do lots of scary stuff. And
awesome.
I've always done that's really been my thing for many, many years.
So I don't know if I ever asked you, like, how long have you been into art? How long have you been into like creating? Because graphic design and illustration are two very different things. But how long have you been creative? Like, do you remember drawing when you were younger?
Try and do this as briefly as possible. But I've been drawing and sketching my whole life. I've got drawings that go back to I drew a picture of Batman with my mom when I was 4 years old, and I've still got that. And I was always drawing and sketching. When I was a kid growing up in Northwestern Virginia, I thought about going into a career in the sciences. I'm interested in the natural sciences, and I was going to go into herpetology or entomology, and I thought art would be a part of that, doing books with my illustrations. And then Star Wars happened in 1977, and it really changed my life. And I saw that art could be a vocation in and of itself. Graduating from high school, I went to Pratt Institute in New York. I left the rural community where I grew up and swore I'd never come back. Stayed in New York for almost 20 years. And the point Nate makes is a good one. When I graduated from Pratt, I had two portfolios. I had a design portfolio and an illustration portfolio. And the goal was always to have a graphic design 9-to-5 gig and then do illustration as a freelancer. And that's what I did for the 20 years I was in New York. And from 1990, it was later than that. From 1993 to 1998, I was in exhibit design, and I designed primarily exhibits for theme parks and trade shows and museums that were high tech, animatronics, 3D video, stuff like that, in its nascent stages. But I left that and went back to ad agency work because I'd gotten married and travel had become a little onerous. Because there was a time, like I think 1993, I averaged 2 weeks out of every month in a hotel somewhere, whether in the U.S. or in Europe or Asia.
Did you help set up the designs that you?
Yeah, I would design the installation. I would design the installation. I would supervise its manufacture. And then I would go on site and supervise the installation and make sure it was up and running for game day, whatever that was.
But like conventions and like job fairs and
doing job fairs. Nature? We did Warner Brothers World in Germany, and we did the Hong Kong Museum of Science and Technology. We did the this big show out in LA called IAPA. We did a bunch of stuff in Vegas for the MGM Grand. So we did casinos and stuff like that. And it was a big push in the 90s to make Vegas more family friendly. And we really rode the wave of that, like doing the Wicked Witch of the West is an 8-foot tall animatronic figure for the MGM Grand Hotel. And then I went back to ad agency life, and it was a really good paying job. And there was a certain amount of security in it and not any of that travel. But I realized that I'd landed myself in a gilded cage. And after a particularly bad day at the office, which involved a fist fight, fortunately, I wasn't involved. I was just a bystander.
I was about to ask if it was a literal fist fight or
a literal fist fight.
Like James McAvoy with the keyboard, like smacking his supervisor over the face with it.
Not quite that. Actually, more impressive than that in a way. It was the vice president of the agency punched the president right in the face, like something out of Indiana Jones. So yeah,
Sweet.
Like the whole wind up and
just the whole wind up and yeah. Anyway, I went home and told my wife, "That's it. We're retired. We're moving back to Virginia." And she said, "What are we going to do?" And I said, "I don't know. We'll find out when we get there." And I started teaching at JMU, and then was able to, because when you're a university professor, there's a certain expectation that you have professional practice outside of just the teaching, because there is that old canard that those who can't do teach. And JMU is the type of university that wants to really make sure that that's not the perception. And so we're required to have what's called professional practice. And for me, that was going out and initially I did believe it or not, which is going to be difficult to believe, I did a whole series of children's books from 2005 to 2008. I've got 3 out of the 4 here, but I did a bunch of children's books that were oriented, were focusing on the space program. So Neil, Buzz, and Mike Go to the Moon, the true story of Apollo 11. Book called Godspeed.
Did you write those too? Or
I wrote and illustrated these. Yeah, wow. And these were done for the book division of Highlights for Children. I'm sure you've seen Highlights for Children.
Yeah, I remember Highlights.
Dentist's Office and all that. And then one about Apollo 13. And then my biggest seller is one, it's called Ham the Astro Chimp, which is the story of the first chimp in space. And I don't have a copy of that. I gave it away. I have copies of it, but not easy to put my fingers on. So I was doing that. And then the folks I was working with, the book division was absorbed by a larger corporate entity, and,
of course,
management changes. And then all of a sudden, you're kind of like old guard and, we're looking for something different. And the phone stops ringing. So I then started working on going back to my love of classic monster movies and started doing these posters just for myself. And then I would take them and show them at conventions. Like there's a big convention in New Jersey, the Chiller Theater Expo that I've done. I think I missed 3. They've done... They've been going on for over 30 years. And I think I've missed 3 shows over that span of time. And then people started asking me, well, would you do commissions? And then companies started asking you to do these collectible posters. So I've been doing those now for about, I guess, 2018 was like the big breakthrough year for me with the horror stuff. I got an illustration in the relaunch of Fangoria magazine.
I am not worthy. I am not worthy.
So, yeah, I did. I got 2 Texas Chainsaw Massacre illustrations. So there's
yeah, boy.
There's another one, and then just this year they did a ash can edition as a giveaway for Fright Rags. So they used my Leatherface as the cover of the little mini magazine edition.
That's beautiful.
So that was really good for me and got me on people's radar. So I started doing these posters. And then from doing the posters, I started doing these packages, and let me get one. Hold on a second. Don't you love it when a guest just gets up and leaves? It's always good.
We've had a couple get up and show us stuff.
Yeah. I'm gonna say, Nate. You know what question I'm gonna ask?
What I was looking for is.
Go for it.
Oh no, I'm gonna wait.
I thought it was here, and I guess it's not.
Don't do it.
Oh well. But I've done 16 different packages for Vinegar Syndrome. Look what I found. Here it is. And like what these are. This is the second one I did. This is a horror film made in Mexico in the 1980s by director Ruben Galindo Jr. And it's the Mexican title is Cementerio de Terror. And then my illustration is a wraparound. And then it's in the English title, which is Cemetery of Terror.
Oh, that's fantastic.
On the jewel case. And then my artwork is also on the disc. So
that is fantastic.
When you get these, it's just, it's like, oh, Rich, here's some crack. And it's just once you start doing these, you love it. And that's been a great process. So
and
doing a lot of that.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Vinegar Syndrome is going back and remastering a lot of these lost films.
Yes.
I'm an avid horror fan, and I've kept a subscription now to Shudder for years. Mm-hmm. Can't get enough of it. But yeah, I'm trying to remember what movie I just saw that Vinegar Syndrome had just remastered. I can't remember it.
Well, they've done so many titles. I mean, the big thing that they're really pushing right now, and they're showing it at festivals, is a film called New York Ninja, and it's not a horror film, but it's a crazy movie. The interesting thing about it is that it was never finished. So they found this movie, I guess, is edited reels with no sound, no titles, no credits. And they were able to completely restore it and get actors to come in and do the voices. They recreated all that. And then that's Dracula. Hold on.
Oh no, leave it up. Oh no, leave him up. Oh yeah, leave him up.
But yeah, here it is. So this is my artwork, the wraparound artwork for New York Ninja. Kind of hard to see with the glare.
No, that's fantastic.
And
that's
then
fantastic.
Looks very Escape from New York.
But then I guess the thing that my biggest get recently was I did the key art for the second season of Creepshow for Greg Nicotero, the executive producer of The Walking Dead. So that's on Shudder. And the key art is also, this is what the DVD is going to look like. Comes out next week. And then the BluRay is going to have my artwork on it as well, but it's a flip. The insert art, you can change it out. Like the retail, at retail, you'll see it. It has a famous illustration or illustration by a famous illustrator from Spain, San Julian, who's been doing horror artwork since the 1970s. And I'm proud to share space with San Julian. And then he did covers for Vampirella and Creepy and Eerie when I was, in high school and college. So that's awesome to share that space with him. So it's a reversible sleeve on the Blu-ray, and then the DVD is going to have my artwork front and center. So
there's always
a round of applause.
Fish.
All the listeners should be clapping right now. All us horror fans are bowing down. Oh,
I love my horror. And
how long have you been into horror? Like, that's a really. So I grew up on a farm, so like movies in general were pretty sparse. But like, how does someone get into like horror at a younger age? Like,
having a mom that's into it, and not only a mom who's into it, but a mom who will shut down everybody who dares criticize. I mean, my mom was a force to be reckoned with. And I
see where you get it from.
One of my favorite stories is one night my mom and I were watching the original 1931 Frankenstein on TV, and the movie was finishing, and I was in tears, and my grandmother just started in, right? She's like, I told you he shouldn't be watching that stuff. And my mother said, my mom called me Ricky. I don't recommend anyone else do that. She says, Ricky, why are you crying? And I said, because the monster burned up in the windmill. And my mother's like, see, he's not scared. He's upset that the monster died. And that was the whole thing. Now, I will say this. My mom made a little bit of a parental error in judgment when she took me to see Psycho when I was 4 years old. That was a mistake. That was a mistake. But the thing I tell people is, I grew up on that stuff. We went to see Dracula, Prince of Darkness with the great Christopher Lee at the drive-in when I was 3 years old, and I can still remember it.
Which drive-in was it?
The BluRay drive-in in BluRay, Virginia, long gone on Route 340. The screen faced the road, and I can remember driving by. I was driving at that point, driving by in 1978 and seeing Dawn of the Dead and going, oh, I got to go see that. And the next night I went to the drive-in and saw Dawn of the Dead.
Hell yeah.
That's Raimi, right?
What's that?
Really, really early Sam Raimi?
No. So George Romero.
No.
Oh, original Dawn of the Dead.
Kids these days.
Nate, no. Rich, stop me. Nate, no.
No, Nate, no.
I'm thinking Evil
Bad
Dead.
Nate.
Yes, you're thinking Evil Dead. Yes.
Evil Dead. No, bad Nate.
Okay, so Rich, I got to ask you this. How many times have you met Joe Bob Briggs?
I haven't met Joe Bob. Now, I've hung out with Tom Savini.
Oh, even better.
Yeah, I've hung out with Tom Savini, and of course, Greg Nicotero has just been incredible for opening doors for me. I did, not only did I do that key art for season 2 of Creepshow, I did 6 fake movie posters for set design for one of the episodes, which is about a little kid who loves horror movies, oddly enough.
Huh. I wonder where they got the idea from for that.
Well, there's a whole generation. There's a whole generation of monster kids. And what I like to say is I am the world's first credentialed monster scholar. Okay. There are a lot of monster scholars in this world, but I have credentials. So
where'd you get credentials, Rich? What are your monster scholar credentials? I got my bachelor's degree
at Pratt. I got my master's degree at Syracuse. I'm looking at the diplomas to try and remember so I can remember. And it all seems like it happened to somebody else. But I wrote my master's thesis, 139 pages on horror comic books, and it was accepted, which is so that means I'm a monster scholar. So
who was your there's horror art, there's horror film. When did horror comic books start being a thing, and how did that impact you differently than the film? Because they're two very different medias.
It is, and what's interesting is that there's a whole story there with a bit of kind of dark history behind it. So horror comics really reached their apex in the 1950s, long before I was born. Companies like EC Comics and Timely, which ultimately became Marvel Comics, and Tower, and all these different publishers, Atlas Comics, and I'm trying to think, there's another one. They all published horror comics. And there was a point where they were competing against one another to see who could put the most gruesome stuff in print. And then this guy comes along. His name was Dr. Frederick Wortham. And he was a psychologist that was attached to the New York Department of Corrections. And through interviewing young kids, and one of the hot button topics of the day was juvenile delinquency, which it looks like all three of us are poster kids for that. But juvenile delinquency, and through his interviewing, he came to this flawed realization that horror comic books and crime comic books were why kids were becoming desensitized and committing these acts.
They were the
GTAs
gangs. of the GTAs of the 50s.
The video games.
The violent video games of the 50s.
Exactly. And he wrote this book called Seduction of the Innocent, where he laid all of society's woes at the feet of horror and crime comics. And then the industry self-regulated because they were afraid the government was going to get involved, because there were actually Senate hearings. And so they came up with the Comics Code Authority, and all the comics got that little stamp in the corner approved by the Comics Code. And with the Comics Code in 1956, whatever year it was instituted, 57, vampires, The Walking Dead, gangsters, all this stuff was just completely purged from comic books. So, for instance, Batman, okay, my favorite superhero, we'll
get into that later.
He stopped fighting homicidal maniacs like the Joker and organized crime figures like Boss Zuko, and started having adventures in outer space, which were just preposterous on their face. So comics really took a nosedive as far as sales went. And in this period between, let's say, 1957 and 1964, these two guys, Russ Jones and Jim Warren, decided to bring horror comics back into the marketplace, not by publishing actual comic books, which were subject to the authority of the Comics Code, but doing it in a black and white magazine format. And that's where Creepy, Eerie, and Vampirella came from. And they were all huge hits and spawned tons of imitators. But now here's where we get to the crux of your question. And I haven't forgotten, Nate, which is amazing. But
it's
Jim
amazing
Warren
that you haven't forgotten, or amazing that the question I asked.
That I haven't forgotten.
Okay, cool.
So Jim Warren also published a magazine called Famous Monsters of Filmland, which was a magazine devoted to movie monsters, primarily the classics. Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney Sr. and Jr. And so there was this collision of the horror comics, Creepy, Eerie, Vampirella, and then Famous Monsters, all being published by the same entity. And so they became interchangeable in my young mind. My mother, she bought every issue of Creepy and Eerie for me. She bought all Famous Monsters. Now, my family drew the line at Vampirella because she was a little sexy time. And that was the one thing that was the dichotomy with my family, is that violence was fine, but sexuality, that was the taboo. So I can remember my parents took me to see one of the Edgar Allan Poe movies, and I think it was The Premature Burial. And there's a guy gets trampled by a horse, and it freaked me out because I've grown up around cattle and horses my whole life, and seeing that on screen just freaked me out more than any vampire or Walking Dead did. But the whole family just sat there eating popcorn, no problem. But then the minute somebody drops their top, like there's a scene in Count Yorga Vampire, movie's over. We're in the parking lot. We're going home. It's done. But that was the way I grew up. And it's actually been good for me in a weird way, is because I don't dabble in the iconography that's largely looked at as misogynistic. I've never done a painting of the monster carrying the defenseless maiden. So it's never really been my thing. And I guess that's a good thing, because then my artwork has never been under scrutiny for its iconography, which, you know how higher ed is these days. I mean, you're judged on the body of your work, regardless of what context, what era or error, depending on how you look at it, it was done in. So thankfully, I just I stick with my monsters, and somebody else can do the questionable damsel in distress.
Not Frank Cho.
Hey, Frank Cho's never going to get a gig in higher education.
No.
I think you know that at an early age when you start
lambasted so many times. How did you So you moved back to Virginia, and you said you'd figured out when you got here. Did you ever see yourself teaching? Like,
Yes.
how did that journey start? And I'd like to get into your syllabus structure a little bit, and like from the creation part to the teaching others to create, like, and what that process looked like.
Well, back when I was a little kid in kindergarten, I had done a presentation on dinosaurs to the other 5-year-olds. I'm sure that would be cringe-tastic if we saw a video of that, but it was deemed worthy enough to put my picture in the local newspaper. And under it, it said, future teacher. And that had always sown a seed. And even very shortly after getting my bachelor's degree, I started teaching illustration at nights in Jersey. I was teaching at a school that's now gone. It was called the Ducray School of the Arts, and I taught illustration there for 3 or 4 years at night, and then was teaching down in Somerset, New Jersey, at another institute. And it's interesting. You start teaching, and you've got this idea in your mind of what a teacher is. And I realized that the first full academic year had passed, and I realized that it wasn't going well, because I was too interested in playing a role of being the teacher, and the formality that I thought came with that. And it was just a bad fit. And at some point I realized that I'm at my best as a teacher when I'm just myself, that I don't throw up any facades. There's no walls. That's why I want to be called Rich. My mom went to her grave thinking it was terrible that I don't insist that my students call me Professor Hilliard. And it's not a good fit for me. I do much better when I'm Rich, and show you what I'm doing, and give you the wisdom of my years in the business, technique, philosophy, the way you deal with clients, and all of that, rather than just trying to package myself in this ill-fitting teacher costume.
How many different classes do you teach in a given semester?
Well, recently, I did a document, I guess 2 years ago, and I couldn't believe all the different classes that I taught over a 23-year span. Everything from 2D design, typography, figure drawing, design methodology, advanced digital, introduction to the Adobe Creative Suite, illustration, comics and cartooning. It just went on and on and on. I couldn't believe all these different classes. A film appreciation class that I called Art, Culture, and the Horror Films of the 1970s. And then...
Shit, why didn't I take that?
What's that?
I said, shit, why didn't I take that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait.
It was a fun class. At one point,
I was stuck in an orchestra.
At one point, I had 40. I had one semester, I had 40 students.
Woo.
And we had a rollicking good time, because one of the things that I like to do with that class was talk about the cultural upheavals in the 1970s, which a lot of people attribute to the 1960s. And yes, there was the Summer of Love. And yes, there was 1968, which was a horrible year with Robert F. Kennedy's assassination and Martin Luther King's assassination. But really, the things that we think about that came out of the 60s, for all intents and purposes, came out of the 70s. The women's movement, Black Power, the people were, yes, there were a lot of protests against the Vietnam War in the late 60s, but that really came to a head in the 70s. And we would talk about all that stuff and then show a horror film from the era that really spoke to the zeitgeist of the time, that what was going on in the larger culture. And for instance, we talked about the My Lai massacre, which was a scandalous crime that was committed in Vietnam by a guy, Lieutenant Calley, and talked about the body count that was on the news every night, how many American servicemen and women were killed in Vietnam that day, and the desensitization that came with that, and then how that informs a film like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is a film, if you watch it, I don't know if it was Rex Reed, but one of the reviewers at the time said that it was the first time they sat in the theater and thought that they were watching a movie that had clearly been made by madmen, people who were insane. Because there's no holds or barred, there's no convention to the storytelling, and
correct, yeah. None.
And and you realize pretty early on there's not going to be any happy ending.
Nope. But God damn, one of the scenes that sticks in my mind for all time is just Leatherface there swinging his chainsaw, and the final girl.
The dance.
Yeah, the dance.
It's really a ballet of the completely unhinged.
Right.
What is the biggest moral takeaway that you've had from a horror movie?
Well, I mean, really, the thing that sticks most in my mind is, and I guess this is why Psycho was such a game changer, and it was so traumatic for me as a little kid, because up to the point I saw Psycho, I had seen Frankenstein, who is a reanimated corpse. Okay. I had seen Dracula, who is an undead vampire. I had seen, movies with ghosts and things like that. It was all tied up in the supernatural. And Norman Bates showed us all that the monster is not Godzilla. It's not Frankenstein. It's not a reanimated corpse. The monster's us. And there is a monster that lurks inside of every person. So that was probably my biggest takeaway was, and I didn't, you don't realize, you don't intellectualize things like that when you're 4 years old, but the freak out that this nice young man who gave this lady, a chicken salad sandwich, actually less than an hour later murdered her in the shower and then submerged her and her car in a bog behind his seedy hotel. And you thought it was his mother, and his mother's been dead for years, and she's a desiccated corpse hanging out either in a bedroom or a basement, and it's all him, and because he is absolutely insane and evil. So,
that's nuts. That is incredibly profound. That the monster is you.
Monster is us.
The monster is us. We have seen the monster, and the monster is us. And probably why Nietzsche is my favorite philosopher. Stare into the abyss. So,
have there been any horror movies in the 21st century? I guess I can say the last 20 years that have made a big impact on you. Non-franchise, like non-soft reboots.
There are a handful, and I'm sure that your audience is a younger audience, and they're like, Conjuring's a franchise now, but what about that? What about Mom, and what about The Nun and that stuff? Seems like there's nothing new under the sun. The last really great horror film that I've seen was The Descent. And what is that? Almost 20 years now.
Yeah.
Neil Marshall's The Descent, I thought was really unique and was powerful. Now, are there things I like? Yeah, I like Malignant quite a bit. I thought that there was way too much reliance on CG effects that were unnecessary, but Malignant just came out this year and I enjoyed it a lot. It's pretty crazy. It's got a mid-movie twist that totally had me invested in it. Is it a great movie? No. Is it original film? No. I mean, it owes a lot to the films of Lucio Fulci that were made in the 1980s. It owes a great deal of it owes a great debt to Dario Argento's Suspiria, which is one of the classics from 1977. But James Wan's *Malignant* is a good movie, not great but good. And then you go, I guess, between The Descent, which came out in, I don't know what, 2004 or something like that.
4 or 5, yeah.
Yeah, and *Malignant*. What do you got? Well, not much, in my opinion. I really like this movie called The Void. I recommend that.
Oh, yes.
Which is very much John Carpenter meets Hellraiser, with a little, with more than a little H.P. Lovecraft thrown in for a good measure. But yeah, I'll stick with the 1970s. That is my go-to decade. I like a lot of stuff from the 80s. I love Reanimator. I love Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2, Army of Darkness. Those are a lot of fun, but there's so much depraved, insane goodness from the 1970s. Plus, Hammer was still cranking out Dracula movies with Christopher Lee.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot to love about the 1970s.
Is Christopher Lee your go-to Dracula?
I love Bela Lugosi too. That they're equals. So I can't choose one over the other. Now, Bela Lugosi only really played Dracula twice. In the original Dracula and in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein. He played a Dracula-esque character in a really fun movie called Return of the Vampire, but the character's name is Armand Tesla. It's not Count Dracula. Then but Christopher Lee played Dracula, I think, total in not just the Hammer movies, but in other films where he was Dracula. I think it was 8 or 9 times. So there's a lot to love there.
Yeah, I remember reading about his passing, and it was very sad because to me, he's always, I mean, I'm younger, obviously, but he's always Saruman from
Saruman
to me.
Count Dooku.
More Saruman than Count Dooku. But,
well, you can talk smack about the prequels, and I get a lot of the prequel criticism, but just there's scenes with he and Ewan McGregor in that in Attack of the Clones that, man, it's just hearing that voice, that Dracula voice in a Star Wars movie was good enough for me. Worth the price of admission.
I was just waiting for Mace Windu to drop a motherfucker, but it never happened. In Revenge of this, in what is it? Yeah, in the third one, they could have dropped an F-bomb, but they never did. They lost their chance.
Yep.
Samuel L. Jackson could have.
Oh man,
I'm sure that would have been a riotous moment, but it doesn't exactly fit Star Wars.
All of the kids that went to see it after seeing the first two.
Hey, how about all the fans that dropped the F-bombs after the last trilogy? That's what's more meaningful.
Yeah, the newer trilogy definitely puts the prequels into a little bit of perspective.
You betcha.
I just about walked out after episode 8. I was upset. So you said, speaking of Star Wars, you said Star Wars like changed your life when it came out in the 70s. Like how did that alter your trajectory as far as like seeing art as a career? Like, what did that make you want to do?
One happened in 77 and one happened in 78.
Broke.
Again, I thought that I was going to do the natural sciences and that illustration would be part of that. But then Star Wars came out and I fell in love with all these characters and all these designs for these characters. And the first Christmas, the Christmas of 77, there were no Star Wars toys, but there were books. There was a book called the Star Wars Sketchbook. There was a book. There was a thing called the Star Wars Blueprints, and then later a book called the Art.
Were they like illustrated guides, like companion pieces to like
much like that? Movies? Yes, but those showed me that art could be the vocation in and of itself. I got to jump up and show you one more thing. But
We love show and tell here.
I was about to say show and tell all over again.
We love show and tell.
So
We're not even
and
in
then
school
the
anymore.
next year, so Star Wars came out in May of 1977. So then we'll flash forward to March of 78. And I got pulled out of school very mysteriously. My mom wouldn't tell me where we were going. And we jumped in the car and we rode over the mountain and we went to James Madison University, believe it or not. And I got to meet this guy. All right.
What?
So that is on the left. That's, believe it or not, that's me with a full head of hair. And there on the right is
Love the glasses.
man himself, Stan the Man. And
Man.
that is Stan Lee looking at some of my drawings and telling me that I could make it if I stuck to my guns. So that was all I needed.
Mind blown.
This is all you need.
Wearing a Spider-Man hoodie,
So,
no less.
no hoodie. It's just a sweatshirt.
That's just a sweatshirt.
Yeah, just a mere sweatshirt. But it
Man,
came from Sears.
How freaking cool Stan Lee looked.
He was the greatest.
Did he emit cool, or was he a very humble guy?
Stan Lee is many things. Humble's not one of them. And
Gotcha.
that's okay.
Yeah. No,
Stan Lee was the keeper of the Marvel flame because he lit that flame. Now, I have close friends who they're like, oh, Stan Lee would have been nothing without Jack Kirby. Stan Lee would have been nothing without Steve Ditko. But if you look at what Kirby and Ditko did without Stan Lee, yes, it's wonderful work. But with Stan Lee, it was magic. The only thing that Stan Lee didn't really truly have a hand in the creation of was Captain America. All right. Everything else has his fingerprints all over it. I don't think there is anywhere in the world now that you can't say the words Iron Man and people don't know who that is. And if you wind back the clock to my childhood, the only people who knew who Iron Man were little kids who read those comic books because he was always a C-lister at best. All right. And now he's the top of the A-list. So Stan Lee was not a humble man, but he was the coolest. Adam West was cool, but Stan Lee is the coolest of the cool.
He was the Steve Jobs of the comic book world.
He is. And I mean, listen, there are other, Bob Kane and Bill Finger created Batman, my all-time favorite comic book character. But just for sheer breadth of impact on the culture, what Stan Lee did it's monumental. It really is. And yes, Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, they were absolutely instrumental in the creation of these characters. But it wouldn't have happened without Stan the Man.
How do you... Okay, so I have a couple of questions. They're very dissimilar.
We need to get to Batman at some point.
I was literally about to ask what I have one about art, like technically art perspective from an art question, and then second is what does Batman? Every comic book fan I ask, I say, who's your what comic books do you read? And almost always, like without exception, it's Marvel, like just as a whole,
right? Marvel,
and then Batman by himself. What does Batman have that Marvel can't replicate? Like, why is Batman almost above Superman? What is Batman's?
Well, he is.
What do people have?
I don't give a crap what anybody says. He is above Superman. He's above them all because Batman is the one comic book character that, for whatever reason, can be done successfully in any way you choose to do it. You can do high comedy, camp Batman, and it works. You can do super serious Frank Miller, you terrorize these kids, and I will throw 4 batarangs that will stick in your arm, and then I will break your arm. All right. You can do that. You watch the cartoon series, The Brave and the Bold, which is a love letter to the comics of the 1960s, which actually made Aquaman cool for the first time before Jason Momoa showed up. But and that's more fun and campy. For whatever reason, Batman is this giant vessel that whatever you throw into it can work if you're true to it. If you're true to your goals. Now, the one place that went horribly, horribly wrong is George Clooney Batman. But if you watch that, thinking this is an Adam West Batman movie without Adam West, you can see that the potential was there for it to possibly work, but it just didn't, because George Clooney at that time in his life, his career, wasn't self-aware enough to play it the way Adam West played.
So your favorite Batman is Adam West?
No. My favorite Batman is Adam West, Christian Bale, Michael Keaton.
Okay, in that order, I see.
No order.
Oh, no order. Okay.
I just and they're all different, yet they all work for me. When I was, again, 4 years old, 66 was a big year for me. Now, somebody will say, well, now you saw Psycho in 66, but it came out in 1960. Well, the beautiful thing about when you were a kid in the 60s, they played anything on a Saturday afternoon at the local theater.
Yep.
One fine day, they showed Psycho. But also in 1966, my dad took me to see the Adam West Batman movie. And there's a scene where he's hanging off the Batcopter's rope ladder, gut punching a shark that is hanging off his boot. That was real. It happened. It was Batman fighting a shark. And it was just one of those great moments in a kid's life. So, and then I'm a young adult, and I had a meeting in New York City, and then I had an apartment in Jersey at that time, and I came out of the city and then changed and got in line with friends, and they had been standing in line at that point like 3 hours, and then we stood in line another hour, and we went opening night to the 1989 Batman movie at midnight. Ooh. And there's another one. I mean, I knew that movie was going to be rock solid for me from the very opening credits sequence with that wonderful Danny Elfman music. Mm-hmm. And then when Nicholson reveals himself as the Joker to Jack Palance, they had been running that clip endlessly on TV to hype the movie. It's like, you can call me Joker. And I had seen that 100 times on TV, but they had never shown the full line, which is, you can call me Joker. And as you can see, I'm a lot happier. And I was like, that is it. That is it right there. And then Christopher Nolan showed me what a realistic, in quotes, Batman could be and how that could work. And so people will ask me, if you could have a Batmobile, which one? Well, you got the 66 for show, and you got the 80s for the highway, but just parallel parking, you want the Nolan Batmobile, because then you actually don't have to worry about parallel parking.
Right.
At all.
Right.
Yeah, as much as I love Nolan's trilogy, I think Christian Bale's Batman is my least favorite.
Really?
I wasn't a fan of his Bruce Wayne. Maybe it's just because I see, as a younger person, I think I see Christian Bale, just like with Iron Man, I see Robert Downey Jr. And it's hard for when I was younger, Michael Keaton was Bruce Wayne to me because I hadn't seen him in anything else. And so to me, it's hard not to see, his character from The Prestige or his character from American Hustle. Like, he's such a contemporary actor. It's too present. It's too modern for me.
That's interesting. Well, I think maybe that time will heal that wound a little bit. There's a film that I'm going back to the horror stuff that I'm really, really fond of. I think it's one of the best things that was ever made for TV was Tobe Hooper's adaptation of Stephen King's Salem's Lot. And when that came on, the lead actor in the movie, the guy who plays the main character, Ben Mears, is an actor named David Soul, who was really big in pop culture as Starsky and Hutch. He was Hutch, and it was a cop show on ABC. And it was tough to not see Hutch fighting vampires. Well, now here we are almost 50 years removed from that. And now I see Ben Mears, and that problem is solved. So I see what you're saying. I never had that problem. I love Christian Bale, and I think that if you took everybody who's ever played Batman, from Robert Lowry, Lewis Wilson, Adam West, all the way up to Affleck and Robert Pattinson today, and you took all of those actors at their prime, and you popped them in a cage, and you said, one man leaves, I still think Christian Bale would wipe the floor with all of them, because he's got so much anger in him that it just really worked for me. And I can remember I was in class, we was teaching a summer class, and that audio had leaked of him having a meltdown on the set of Terminator. And if you've never heard that, it's worth listening to.
Nope,
he just has a complete he just loses his temper at the director of photography.
He's method though, isn't he?
Oh, totally method. And I had a student who worked with him, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. But anyway, he just goes off on this guy. And one of my students says, well, Rich, what do you think about that? And I said, well, we've got a guy with substance abuse issues playing Iron Man, and we've got a guy with anger control issues playing Batman. So it's win-win, baby. That's the way I see it. And
pay him enough to stay clean for a filming cycle.
One of my students worked on The Dark Knight Rises, and she said that when Christian Bale was on set and the cameras were rolling, you did not mess with him. You did not go into his space. But the minute the day wrapped, he was great. He was great. So at least he wasn't like full on method where, he was Bruce Wayne or Batman 24/7. But apparently that's the way Heath Ledger rolled for a while, that prepping for the Joker, he did the method for 24/7, locked himself in a hotel room. Apparently he made a bunch of diaries and stuff, which I would love to see. But that he totally immersed himself in that role. And there's a thought, and I don't know how much credence I give this to, but that damaged him, and who knows? But Jack Nicholson told someone, you don't let that character get too inside. Too
real.
What are your thoughts on Robert Pattinson as the next Batman, and are you excited for it?
You want me to lie to you or tell you the truth?
He hesitated.
I'm apprehensive.
Yeah.
I'm apprehensive. I don't know. I don't have any baggage with Robert Pattinson. I've never seen one of the Twilight movies. I mean,
you best. Yeah, don't.
But you could do a whole. There's a whole film critique there, like a whole thing. Probably a semester of film studies on romance and
itself.
Romance. No, I'm just saying the Twilight series and the romance and vampires and all this.
But that all stems from the Anne Rice stuff, the interview with the vampire stuff. But the most dismissive thing I could say about Robert Pattinson is, Cedric Diggory is going to be Batman. That's all I got. But I've been told that he's done some great work. People are recommending the movie The Lighthouse to me. I haven't seen it yet.
You should. If you like horror, you should definitely check out The Lighthouse. It's
but I just
great
feel
bottle
like
episode.
He's a little too slight and a little too emo for Batman. My feeling is make me a believer, but there's another thing here, and I've had this conversation many, many times. Movies today are not being made for me. I'm the old demographic. I'm out, and I'm okay with that. I've got my Dark Knight trilogy. I've got my Michael Keaton first Batman movie. I'm not that big on Batman Returns. I've got the Adam West Batman of my childhood. So if these are great, that's just a bonus. I look at the Marvel movies, and I like more of them than I don't. I don't love them all. But to be able to see Doctor Strange, that's a big win for me. But I realize that not all those movies are being made for my demographic. I'm not the world's biggest Tom Holland Spider-Man guy, and I love Spider-Man. Spider-Man is actually my second favorite comic book character after Batman. And I'm like team Tobey Maguire, and I always will be. Spider-Man 3 notwithstanding.
Yep.
But Tom Holland's okay. He's just not my generation of Spider-Man. And I don't know if I should tell this story, but that's just a prelude to me telling the story. Is that when Spider-Man 1 came out, what was that, 2002? I think it was 2002.
Or 2 or 3?
No, it was 1. It was 1 or 2.
One or 2.
And I
okay.
think,
It came out after 9/11. And I remember because that kind of informs that scene on the bridge where people are throwing stuff at the Green Goblin and saying, you attack one of us, you attack all of us, which was really a callback to 9/11. But there's the scene in Spider-Man 1 where the guy who killed Uncle Ben is getting away. He sees the car and he makes that first leap of faith, and he's able to, web shoot his way through the concrete canyons of New York to get to the killer of his uncle. I blew a gasket in the theater, man. I mean, I'm with a whole row of JMU faculty, and I'm sitting in my seat crying my eyes out. And one of my colleagues leaned over to my wife and says, Rich, crying? And she's just like, don't say anything. Just
leave it alone. Just let him be.
Because the Spider-Man 1, to a certain degree, and then Spider-Man 2 with Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, and I'm super happy to see him come back.
Yes.
They are the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko, John Romita Sr. Spider-Man comics brought to life. That is my childhood, and Sam Raimi nailed it, especially with the second one. Doc Ock is just the shit, okay? And Doc Ock has always been my favorite Spider-Man villain, and they just, they completely and utterly nailed it.
I had a question a minute ago, but I forgot what it was. Oh, it's terrible.
Getting old sucks.
Yeah, I'm not even.
Ask me about that sometime.
I almost had.
You're just a young man in an old shell.
Old man's body.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about flashing like a disclaimer at the beginning of this episode. It's like we never asked Rich what his age was. We're just going to leave it there. You can infer from like timestamps, but
this doesn't bother me at all. I know ageism is a thing. I try and present myself as authentically as possible. And if somebody dismisses me and says, okay, boomer, or whatever, boomer, fine, whatever. But I will be 60 in January. I'm healthy. I've still got the eye of the tiger. I'm still out there taking care of clients and trying to be passionate about what I do, not only in my own personal work, but in the classroom. And if you're willing to listen to what I bring to the table, that's great. If you're not, vaya con Dios.
How do you like, there's a couple of questions. Like, how do you structure your classes? Like, are you given free reign of your first class to final test? And then also, how do you balance your class time, like your grading papers, grading assignments, and all of the posters that you do? Because your Instagram is incredibly prolific. Like the stuff that you pump out is ridiculous. Like, but you're also a teacher. How do you balance that?
I don't. It everything flows into everything else. And I'm very concerned that maybe some of my students in my illustration class are getting tired of hearing the trials and tribulations of the current job I'm working on. But I want them to know what it is to deal with clients. I talk about money. I talk about when they pay me, how much they pay me.
Yeah, we'll get into that in a minute. That is a whole subsection of conversation that I would love to dive into a little bit. I am completely
transparent about everything. The only time that I bring any opacity into the conversation is if somebody is acting like a complete and utter jackass, and I'm just like, I'm going to protect you from yourself by not telling people what your name is. I've had some interesting emails with clients in the past, and I've blacked the name out because it's just obvious that you're being a jackass. And I want students to see that. I want students to see the good, the bad, and the ugly of working with and for clients. So I don't really balance it at all. I bring everything into the classroom, and I bring the classroom into everything that I do because my students really inspire me as well. I have the best illustration class this semester that I have had in 23 years. Now, next year, will I say the same thing? Nope, not unless they're better. This class is just completely and utterly kicking ass. And they know it, and I tell them that. And I gave them the parameters of the final project today, and I said, "You've done so well so far this semester, and all I expect now is greatness." So I'm expecting great things from the final. We're doing all things movie posters. What?
How do you balance like the time allotment? So like, when do you work on your stuff versus like when do you work on
I'm a night person.
Your class stuff?
So I'm teaching in the afternoons and the evenings. I just got out of class before we started the podcast tonight. And then as soon as we're done tonight, I'm probably going to wrap up here, drive home, and then I've got work to do for this new client. I've got a t-shirt design that I'm working on. So I'm going to work on that probably till about 4 in the morning, and then I'll go to sleep, and I will get up around the crack of noon. How strong is your
coffee?
What?
How strong is your coffee? I am not 9:30, and I am done.
Oh wow, and yeah. See, but I've always been a night person. I've never done anything worth a damn earlier than 7 p.m. as far as my own professional work. Everything I've done of any
my
value,
wife would be jealous.
Anything I've ever done of value professionally has been done between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. So
you're working those Hunter S. Thompson hours.
I am. I mean, it's just it's interesting that
minus the drug regimen.
Right. That's the only place that I let the Hunter S. Thompson go to the side. I'm not being inspired by his use of recreational pharmaceuticals.
Speaking, so it's weird for me because like Hunter S. Thompson and Ralph Steadman are so inseparable for me.
Yes.
Maybe it's because so there's a brewery out of Maryland called Flying Dog that uses Ralph Steadman for their bottle design. Are there any artists that who's one of your biggest, give me a top 3 of like your biggest like art inspirations? Like there's always a bigger fish. Who do you try to emulate?
Well, number one, as far as my drawing style is Bernie Wrightson.
100%.
Huge Bernie Wrightson.
Yep.
And then Frazetta.
His oil paintings or his ink drawings?
Everything. I mean, Frazetta was the consummate artist. There's some interesting interviews with him that were done, I guess, about 20 years ago, where he talks about, he was a prodigy. I mean, he showed a painting that he did when he was 8 years old that was as good as anything that I was doing when I was in my 20s. But
Damn.
Frazetta, just incredible artist. And then let's see. I'm a big fan of Bob Peak. Bob Peak was a movie poster artist who was probably the thing you're going to know Bob Peak best for is Apocalypse Now poster.
Mm-hmm. With the helmet.
He did Star Trek: The Motion Picture. He did. Oh golly.
Hey, were you thinking of Full Metal Jacket there?
Yes, I was. I wasn't going to say anything.
Okay.
Yeah, I had to correct him. Sorry.
And then, and one of my all-time favorite Bob Peak posters is his poster for Camelot, which is a musical. And just the drawing and the color and the way he did Vanessa Redgrave's hair as this just orange graphic device. It's Bob Peak was absolute master to the degree that I don't know. I don't know how much of this is true and how much of this is just legend, but apparently at the end of his career, when he was doing the Apocalypse Now poster, when he was doing Star Trek, Pennies from Heaven, Excalibur, he was getting $100,000 a poster.
Holy crap.
Well, how long did that take him? Months?
Well, I mean, if you look at the Apocalypse Now series, he did a whole bunch of posters. They only really used one of them for the key art, but he did a ton of finished artwork for Apocalypse Now, some that saw the light of day and some that didn't. But yeah, Bob Peak was absolute master. And if you look at if you do look at my Instagram, you'll see there are a couple of things that I've done that are specifically homages to Bob Peak. It's my version of the Star Trek, the motion picture poster is kind of a homage to Bob Peak, and another illustrator.
That's the painting with the Enterprise flying towards you, right?
Yes.
With like the rays behind it.
Yes. And then the three, and then Spock, McCoy, and Kirk in the front. And then I also did one, I guess, earlier for Death Proof, which is an homage to Bob Peak.
How do you, I mean, we can talk about client acquisition a little bit, but how do you start a project? So a customer or a client like approaches you, what is your first order of business? And then how do you begin conceptualizing a piece? Well, half of this question's for me as like, a person who does lots of commissions, and, I never took one of your classes.
I've gotten all my best clients of recent vintage have all come from appearances at shows. So going and setting up at conventions has really been key to my success of recent years. So I'm at the show and I've got stuff up on easels or whatever, and somebody will come up and they'll just engage you in conversation, and then they'll say something about commissions. Or, well, Greg Nicotero was just really upfront. He was just like, I love your work and I want to work with you. He said, can you do a poster for Creepshow for a red carpet event? Can you turn something around fast for me? And I said, yes, sir, I can. I'm like Jack Burton and the Pork Chop Express. Yes, sir, the check is in the mail. But so he was very direct. But other people are a little more circuitous in the way they come to it. And then they're just like, well, do you do commissions? And how much do you charge? And then that's how I got Fangoria. And that's how I got Vinegar Syndrome. And that's how I got this new client that I can't talk about. It all happened exactly the same way. But what
does your planning process look like for a new piece? Like client aside, how do you as a creative start a job?
It all depends on the client. Now, Fangoria said we have this script. Well, it wasn't a script. It was what they call a treatment or a scriptment, I think is more appropriate, because it was a half filled out script. It was more than just a treatment for an unfilmed version of Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. And we want you to do an illustration that shows those characters in this new setting. So I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. They sent me the scriptment. I read it, and then I just started sketching out different thumbnails. And I work really loosely. And I'll just try and recreate what my sketching process looks like real quick. Hold on one second. Let me get.
At what stage do you show them the thumbnails? Do you ever think to yourself, they're going to want something more concrete than this before you show it to them? Or is it literally just a massive spitball?
I don't show thumbnails anymore because I've come to the grim realization that thumbnails confuse more people than it helps.
I'm going to take that home because I have had that problem so many times.
You and we understand thumbnails. Regular folks don't. They just don't. So hold on one second. Let me get this oriented.
Because it's more for like the action line, and for you, it's shorthand for you as an artist.
Exactly. So let me set this up. This is my workhorse. This is my iPad Pro. Everything that I've shown you, Creepshow, Vinegar Syndrome, Fangoria, everything's been done on either this one or the first one I got. So my iPad Pro has been my workhorse now for 4 years and counting. But for like the Texas Chainsaw
worth
Massacre,
their weight in gold, man.
What's that?
They're worth their weight in gold. I used one for ages until I decided to go back to paper for a while.
Okay, here we go. So for like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, look here. Look, that's Leatherface. Yay. And he's holding his chainsaw, and he's a big burly guy, and he's got his big forearm showing. And then the apron's coming off here, and I've got some faces down in here, and then I've got the mansion, which figures in the script, and there's a driveway coming down the road, and here's a Rolls Royce, and there's my sketch. All right. And if I showed that to a client, their heads would explode. You don't show shit like this to a client. All right. So what I do, and can I actually show you something that I've shown to a client? No, I can't show you that.
No, you cannot.
No, I cannot.
If there's any you can show them, I'd love to post them as like PR for the episode before it comes out. If you have anything you can show.
Probably old work.
Yeah, only I could. Yeah, that's really all I can show. I don't have anything that's new that I can show
fine.
without fear. Let's put it that way. So,
we'd be owing Rich a lot of money if something got leaked out.
Trying to see if I can find something that was actually rejected. I archive everything, but I tell you what, I can show you something. I'm going to actually erase a little piece of this to protect the guilty. This is a project that I walked away from, but this was for a Halloween event, and they wanted an image that was for a poster and a t-shirt. And they sent me, samples of other artwork, like the mortuary poster, which I was very familiar with, and some other things. And they said they wanted it done in that style. So this is what I gave them. And they were like, well, it's a little too dark. We went more like a Goosebumps style. Now, now I had done 6 hours of work and had never heard Goosebumps uttered once. So then I came back at them and gave them this, wow, which is the same thing, which is more of those kind of candy Goosebumps colors. And then I get a message, and it's like, well, the boss looked at it and he wants it to be more of a landscape now. And I'm just like, I'm done. This is way too much work. I was told they had negotiated me way down from my normal price. All right. This was supposed to be a poster and a t-shirt. And I originally said $800. And then they said, well, we don't have the budget for that. And after a whole bunch of back and forth, it ended up being $300. And I said to them, They said, well, how do you want to proceed? I said, I'm out. This is way too much work chasing $300. And I don't feel like that the right hand knows what the left one is doing. And I wish you the best of luck. And that was it. I was done. And I walked away from it. I've never done that before. But sometimes you just have to realize that something's not worth the effort you're putting into it. And I'm not going to cast pearls before swine.
Yeah, that is I am fortunate to be a creative who also has like a business sense on the one side. Like as a creative person, has that been difficult for you to learn?
What, the business part of it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I'm pretty bad at some of that stuff. I should have never agreed to $300. I mean, my wife, she was furious with me about that because she just knew from the get-go that
broke clients cause you the most trouble.
These were a bunch of flakes. That's her words. That's edited slightly for a family audience, but she was 100% right about that, and she made me promise that I would never go below $500 for anything in the future.
Yeah, my lower ceiling is about 400, and that's for an 8x10,
right?
In black and white. Like
but I'm not gonna go chase these nickel and dime jobs like that when people are just art directing you to death, and they really, at the end of the day, they don't know what they want. I had a lot of that a few years ago with a group of individuals. I had done some regional theater posters, and I did 5 iterations for one production because it was at this point where the whole tenor of the discussion was, we don't know what we want, but we know we don't want this. Well, that's helpful. And that goes back to that whole don't show sketches anymore, because I had shown a sketch for one play and the director says, is it going to be lines like this? And that was when I realized that you can't show sketches anymore. So how far do you go before getting a job? Like for me, I used to do like a handful of thumbnails, and then when they would latch onto one, I would do full pencils of that. Like, how far do you go to get a job, or do people like already know what they want when they're hiring you? These days, and I know that this is going to jump up and bite me at some point, but these days I give them one option. Here's my best shot. If you don't like it, I'll go back to the drawing board with the comp. I don't even feel comfortable calling it a sketch anymore, because the stuff that I do is way more finished than that. Like, I generally take something to about, I don't know, maybe a 75, 80% level of finish and show them that. And that's a lot when they throw it out. I mean, I did one of the BluRay jackets I did for a movie called Hallelujah, which is about a woman who falls in love with a serial killer. And she ends up being his like right hand. She's into it. She goes, I love you, and if this makes you happy, I want to help you do your thing. And it's a French film or Belgian film, I think. Anyway, I had done a version which was much more in the Gothic horror tradition. And they said, Rich, we want something that looks a little more contemporary. So I threw it out. And I threw it out with no rancor, because they've been fabulous to work with and for. And I was glad to go back. And I was just like, well, what am I going to do? How do I do the serial killer thing more contemporary? And I sometimes you think in terms of image, and then sometimes occasionally I'll think in terms of a visual device. And yeah, I don't have that where I can show it to you quickly, but the visual device I came up with is doing the image like it's a stained newspaper. So this serial killer is marrying women, getting them to sign over inheritances and insurance and stuff like that, and then dispatching them. So I did a series of duplicated wedding dresses, each with a different blood spatter on it. And that goes across the back into the front. And then the front has a woman's hand holding a shoe and a man's hand coming up to like embrace. Because there's a scene in the film where the lover kills one of the wives with a shoe, like a pump.
So do you watch the films to get inspiration?
I do. They send me screeners and I watch them. Only now, trying to think. They sent me a screener one time that was too big for me to download. It was like 14 gigabytes and nothing I had wanted to download it.
Wow.
So I just watched trailers and reviews on YouTube and went from there. But they send me the screeners and then I watch them and try and generally what I'll do is I'll watch the screener late at night and then go to bed and dream of imagery based on the film. I do a lot.
It's crazy how that works. Like your mind like tells you, like there have been a handful of designs I've done where like it came to me in a dream or 3 o'clock in the morning, my body wakes me up and I have to like write it down before I forget about it. Like, it's weird.
A lot of my paintings, the preponderance of them, I see them in my mind's eye, and then I just have to bring them to reality. I say this over and over, and when I do podcasts and interviews, I try not to tell the same damn story in the same damn way over and over and over.
A new audience, here you go. First time for everything.
But it gets to be like, how many times do you want to hear Billy Joel sing Piano Man? You know, I mean, it's just like, yeah. So I try not to tell the same stories in the same way. But the imagery, I visualize stuff in my mind and I can put images together. I did a Exorcist piece for Mad Duck Posters. And I saw that image in my head. And then it's just a matter
of a girl with like the shadow of the cross on her face.
Cross, yeah.
Yep.
But the trick is to make the reality as good as you saw it in your mind. That's the trick.
Yep, I get that.
Because sometimes it happens and sometimes it don't. And occasionally, it's better than you saw it in your mind. And that's
I'm still working on the par. Okay. I'm still working on that's what I saw. All right. Next. Do you, as we start to reach the downward slope of this conversation, how would you encourage someone getting into the artistic world as far as, practice? Like what is something you tell like a struggling student in your class, like someone that saw it on a schedule and they signed up for it?
Well, I'll go back to a conversation that I actually had last night. I talked to one of my closest friends from college. His name's George Pratt. He's won the Eisner Award. He's done graphic novels. He's done everything. I learned more from George Pratt about painting than I did any of my professors at Pratt Institute back in the day. Now, George Pratt and Pratt Institute are not related.
I was about to ask if they were
It's just a happenstance. But if you see George's work, you're gonna recognize it if you look it up. Anyway, George and I, we've known each other now for over 40 years. And I was calling him, asking him about this never-ending job that I'm doing currently for this one client. And we went back and forth, and we were talking about the old days, and we were talking about what separated the people who are still in the profession, that are still working, for those that don't seem to make it. And in all honesty, I was a marginal talent when I was a young man. But what made up for that, and this is George's word, is I had bags of passion, and I never stopped trying to improve myself. So what is my advice for young artists? You have got to love it. You have got to want it with every fiber of your being, or it ain't going to happen.
Are there any practical steps that a young person can take
to
make that better?
You paint every damn day. We were talking about this in class tonight. When I was a kid, you want to see some show and tell? Wait for this. Okay. Do you know what this is?
Is that your participation award from a...
No, this is a trophy for singing. This is a voice trophy. I used to sing, and I used to play the trombone. And when I graduated from high school, I put that trombone in my parents' basement, and I have touched it once since. Do I sing? Sure. I sing in the shower, and I sing in the car on occasion, and I sing Happy Birthday. I do a great Bill Murray-esque Happy Birthday, which would blow the speakers out on all of our computers, so I won't do that right now. But no, I don't sing anymore because I put all my chips, I'm all in on this. I'm all in on the art. I'm all in on the drawing and the painting. And I'm all in on the teaching, but it's all together. It's all one thing. I told you, everything is interconnected. I don't have this personal life and this professional life, and they're separate. You know, I did one of the paintings that I did. I was telling a bunch of students 2 weeks ago. One of the paintings from the first space book I did. This is a painting of Apollo 8 circumnavigating the moon on Christmas Eve of 1968. I painted that on Christmas Eve. My wife wasn't entirely happy about that, but I had to do it for a whole host of reasons. And that's what I did on Christmas Eve that year, is I painted that picture of the command and service module circumnavigating the moon. Because that's part of the passion and part of the just wanting to succeed.
When did you swap out digital for physical?
2006. And this is another story of marital bliss. And my wife and I, we've been together now. This is we've been married 25 years. We've been together for 27 years. And I'd been working on the chimp, the Ham the Astro Chimp book. And I was, of course, working nights, and I'm cleaning brushes at 3 a.m. and then driving home. And I get home like, I don't know, it was 4-ish. And my wife says to me, she's like, I am so tired, but I will not go to bed until I know you're home. She says, am I ever going to see my husband at home again? And I said, I've been thinking about that. I said, if I can get my digital chops to the same level as the traditional media, or hopefully better, then I can paint at home while we're watching movies together. And she said, do that. So the really great thing, and I don't want this to come off braggadocious. It's the last thing I want. But COVID, my wife and I, we were together, for however 18 months, something like that. And we had a wonderful time. I know marriages that crashed and burned during COVID, but we had a great time. I worked. We watched tons of movies, and we had a terrific time, and we're even closer now than ever, which is a wonderful thing. So at my wife's urging, I switched over to digital in 2006. So, and I still draw in pen and ink. If you go on to Amazon, you can type in Edgar Allan Poe, Tales of Madness, and then my last name, and you'll see an illustrated Kindle book of Edgar Allan Poe stories. Well, all of those were done. The drawings are done in pen and ink on paper, and then scanned into the computer and then painted digitally on top. So I haven't totally walked away from traditional media. I still do brush pen and ink drawings and stuff like that. But as far as the professional painted work, it's all digital now. And I started out painting, believe it or not, with a mouse. Okay. Painting with a mouse. That's its own skill set. And then I got one of those Wacom tablets that you can draw directly on. And then
I remember when I first met you, you had an on-screen Wacom tablet.
And then I got my iPad Pro, I guess 2017. And that was that's the game changer of game changers.
And your life changed forever.
Yeah.
No, Phil, you're not even kidding. Like, as an illustrator, like the iPad Pro with the balance of the pencil it's unreal. And Procreate in general is just.
Do you know how much I paid for Procreate?
$20.
Wrong. $8.
He gets an educational discount.
No. I bought it for the old iPad when it was $8. And I was using my finger. I'd seen Jim Lee had done a YouTube thing where he did a Joker in Procreate with his finger. And I bought Procreate. I tried to do something with my finger, and I said, this is garbage. All right.
Does Procreate predate the iPad Pro? I thought it was designed exclusively.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was collaborative. I thought it was designed for the iPad Pro.
And then I bought one of those little ballpoint pens that had the little squishy, like faux finger tip on it. And I tried drawing stuff with that, and it just didn't work. And then you just have it, and it's in the cloud. And my buddy Scott Anderson called me, and he goes, iPad Pro, Apple Pencil, Procreate, it's going to change your life. And I said, really? I said, I've got Procreate. So I ended up buying the iPad Pro and the pencil, and cracked open that Procreate for the first time in years. And it was on. Game on.
Game on.
How do you? I have a couple nitty gritty questions before we end our conversation.
And I got more about horror movies, so
be here all night.
Whichever one you want to go first.
How do digital brushes differ from physical brushes, and does it change your process at all?
Not really. I mean, you get used to the biggest change for me is the difference between having a painting, having a physical manifestation of your artwork, whether it's on.
Does that mess with you at all?
What?
Like, does that mess with you? Like,
it did originally. It did originally, and now I'm over it. Because really, as an illustrator, that canvas, that's just a stage in the process. The finished piece of art is this. All right. This is the finished piece of art. This is what everybody sees. And any illustrator that says, oh God, I hate the way that reproduced. It was too dark. It went too magenta, whatever. Well, you got to figure out what happened and try and fix it for next time, because this is the final piece. This is what everybody's going to hold in their hands. Nobody's going to see that file. I don't know. I was talking to a guy today about these NFTs and all this stuff.
I wanted to ask you about that. I didn't know if you had any thoughts on it.
it just all seems like smoke and mirrors to me, but who knows? Ask me in a year. I'm going to try something. I'm going to try and do an NFT of something and just see what the process is. And I'm not looking to make $1 million. I'm just looking to do it for my own edification and to understand the process, because you start talking about like, well, you have to pay for gas. And it's like, gas? We're taking our Prius somewhere and we have to pay mileage. And no, gas is something that you pay for as part of the minting of the NFT. And do I even know what I'm talking about? No, I read one article. It gave me a headache. And then I thought, and then they pay you in crypto, which again, I'm an old guy. That just feels like monopoly money to me. That's like, I think I've got a 1966 plastic Batman coin laying around somewhere. That feels more like real money to me than the crypto stuff. I guess if I could turn crypto into a Lamborghini, I would change my my attitude.
Outlook. Yeah.
You can.
But my feeling is, if you want to pay me in crypto, I am going to figure out how to turn that into greenbacks as quickly as humanly possible.
Phil, what did you?
Pretty easy. It's pretty easy to do.
Okay.
Okay, so I got to get ready
Got
here.
the horror questions.
I know. Okay, so favorite horror director, favorite monster or villain or antagonist, and favorite movie poster, favorite horror movie poster that has inspired you since you were a kid or a young adult.
Well, favorite director. That's really tough. But you just talk about body of work. It's John Carpenter, hands down. John Carpenter, all the way. Halloween, The Thing, The Fog, Escape from New York. I mean, I know that's not a horror film. I love John Carpenter's vampires. I think that gets a bad rap. He did a episode of Masters of Horror called Cigarette Burns with Norman Reedus, who everybody knows from The Walking Dead, which is incredible. Highest recommendation. If you haven't seen Cigarette Burns, it's an hour long. It is an hour you need to spend.
That's my homework for the week.
Favorite character, Dracula. No question. Dracula all the way. I mean, we were somewhere, and I'll just try to listen to them, children of the night. What music they make! I say that all the time because I love Dracula. And then favorite horror movie poster. This is
there's so many. It's hard to choose.
There's so many, but I don't own this poster. I never will own this poster unless something miraculous happens. But the 1932 movie poster for The Mummy is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. It is, and I don't really like The Mummy that much. I think it's a little bit of a snooze fest. I know that flies in the face of a lot of horror fans, but
actually, I've heard different. A lot of people actually aren't really turned on to the Boris Karloff Mummy. I thought it was great. I think Boris Karloff, when he steps into a role and he becomes that monster, that character, there's no comparison.
Listen, Karloff and Lugosi, they were the kings. They were the kings of horror. Yeah. And then you got Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee and Vincent Price, and they're the princes of darkness. That's the royalty. So, and then another director. So I gave you the three, okay, but then I got to give mad props. Okay, Tobe Hooper, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Life Force. If you've never seen Life Force, it is a fever dream of horror science fiction. It is about a naked space vampire girl from Halley's Comet. That's all I need to tell you. Go see this movie. his adaptation of Salem's Lot, a film called Eaten Alive. These are all great films. And then the guy who he made more than one horror movie, but he made one horror movie that made an indelible impression for all time. William Friedkin, the director of The French Connection, the director of a very underrated movie called Sorcerer, which has nothing to do with sorcery. It's the name of the truck, but The Exorcist, the director of The Exorcist, which was just, wow. Just the TV commercials for The Exorcist would cause you to lose sleep when I was a kid.
I love that movie had such an impact on people, and literally people walked out of it
in terror.
Yeah, in terror, thinking
sobbing.
The devil. Yes, the devil was real.
The devil was real, and we were on Instagram talking about childhood fears, and I never saw The Exorcist until I was an adult, because that was one even my mother knew better than to take me to see. But just the TV commercials and all the business in the media about demon possession and exorcisms and all this stuff. I slept with a New Testament under my pillow for years because to ward off demons. Yeah. And then my other big fear was, I don't know if you've ever seen this movie. It's not the greatest, but it had an impact. It's a film called The Legend of Boggy Creek. And it is a pseudo documentary about a Sasquatch-esque creature that lives in the swamps of Texarkana, Arkansas. And there is a scene where this guy is sitting on the toilet taking care of business, and Bigfoot is watching him. And that freaked me out as a kid. So there were never enough blinds to pull down if I had to go to the bathroom after the sun went down. Let's just leave it at that.
Wow.
That's hilarious.
Wow.
Well, I have one more question before we close up for the night.
All right.
This is something that I like to ask all of our guests. We've only had one or two answers to this. But my favorite question to ask is, what purchase of $100 or less have you made in the last year that has made the biggest impact on your life?
$100 or less.
Apple Pencil doesn't count because it's $129.
No, I know.
Baby.
I'm aware of that. Procreate was so many years ago. That doesn't count.
Yeah, that doesn't count.
$100 or less that made an impact.
Could be a book, could be a movie ticket, could be a meal from home.
Boy, you got me. You got me stumped.
He's stumped.
I am stumped. I bought a set of tiny little screwdrivers at Dollar Tree for $1 that really have been instrumental more than
there
once.
You go.
That's all I've got. Okay. Micro screwdrivers from Dollar Tree. That's all I've got.
Well, Rich, we thank you for spilling your guts on the art world this evening. I've wanted to talk to you for a while about just art and horror and teaching in general. So we really
well, it is truly my pleasure. I'll say one last thing. I'll give myself a little plug.
There you go.
Please
How can
follow
people
me on Instagram? I'm the Batman Professor, all one word, no underscores, no periods. And it's all art all the time. I rarely post any pictures of myself. I don't do selfies. I guess the most recent picture I have of myself is Greg Nicotero, and I did we're at an event in Louisville, Kentucky back in June. So that's the only picture of recent vintage that you'll see of me, or might be one from a signing I did in Connecticut. But I don't do a lot of selfies. I don't do any foodies. I don't do any cat videos. And I certainly don't do any
cat
lingerie. So
do you
it's
have
all
any cats?
hard.
Damn.
What?
You don't have any cats?
Do I have cats?
Yeah.
I have one cat.
You have one cat. Okay.
And we don't have any children. We have this cat. And that's a plenty. So yeah.
Cool. Well, again, thank you so much for
yes.
For sharing with us.
It was my pleasure. And anytime. So Real quick question is, will this be archived so I can tell folks to watch it?
Yeah, so we'll drop this episode 2 weeks from yesterday. So
Okay.
we drop episodes bi-monthly. So every other week we'll drop an episode. And then we'll probably post a handful of videos beforehand to share with you. And if you'd like access to the full video, we can send you the Google Drive with that as well.
Yep.
Cool. All right, well, keep me in the loop.
Yeah, I'll be posting and tagging you and stuff the week or so beforehand. So
yeah, we'll definitely get in touch over Instagram. I'm going to start sending you movie recommendations because yes, there have been some decent films made in the last 20 years.
For us young cats.
I know. Don't be sending me TV series. I want cinema. I'm not a big TV person, so
movies.
As the lead actor said in the French film Man Bites Dog, which I highly recommend, cinema.
All right. Well,
cool.
Everyone, stay hungry, and Nate,
stay safe and stay creative, everybody.
Stay creative.